So you have the link.
Yeah.
Here you go. So you have the link.
Do I need to click on that link? No, I don't want to click on that. No, I don't want to.
I don't have your video.
You don't have it? Oh, hold on.
Just sometimes. I still have a problem where I don't see your video.
I'm not sure why. I tried turning it off and back on.
Yeah.
It
worked before.
Yeah, it was working fine before.
I still have a problem where I don't see your video.
I'm not sure why. I tried turning it off and back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have a problem where I don't
Yeah, I'm playing with all the buttons. I can't get it to work. Should I hang up and rejoin?
yeah, why not? Yeah.
Okay, let's try that. Yeah, I'm playing with all the buttons. I can't get it to work. Should I hang up and rejoin?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Okay, let's try that.
What we do here is go back.
Hello?
Here is go back.
See me now?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
See you now.
Okay. Okay.
There you are. See you now.
If I do that, do you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Oh. Great. Okay. Still a little thing we have to finish. Let's understand Great. Okay. So let's oh, that's it. One more time. Do you hear me? Yes. Yes, you can. Okay, let's go. Let's do it. Three, two, one, go. Hello, welcome for a new edition. Welcome for a new edition of Art Stars Live. Why that? Okay. That one will be cut. What is happening? Hello? Yeah. That's the second time, and I always have new. Oh my god! Okay, just a second. Yeah, I'm back. What? So let me explain. I have a ghost in here that doesn't want to go away. Okay. Phew. That's good. And I am going to show you that. Like that, you'll see what's happening. Here we go. Maura Turner, thank you. You've been through the whole thing of having a stream, second stream, and different kind of problem today. Welcome, Aimee Chalifoux. How are you? Better, I think. So one thing I'm not sure is, do they hear you when you speak? So I'm just watching the replay. No, they can't hear you. Great. That's good. No. Hear you when you speak. Okay. I'm just going to go back to some music on my computer.
Okay.
I'm just watching the replay. No, they can't hear you. Great. That's good. No.
Hola, soy Foncho Ramírez Corso, pero me pueden decir Foncho. Soy...
Hear you. I'm just going to go back to some music on my computer. Just watching. No, they can't hear you. Great. That's good. No.
Hola, soy Foncho Ramírez Corso, pero me pueden decir Foncho.
Yes.
Soy...
I'm just going to go back. Okay, that's it. We're good. Some music on my computer.
Is it okay now?
Yes, I think it's okay. Moira, tell me if it's okay in few seconds, because we have a delay between what is happening in real life and what is happening with YouTube. Aimee, welcome for Art Stars Live. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you, Baptiste. How are you?
I'm good. I think I'm good. So today it's Art Stars Live. So Art Stars is something that happened a couple years ago when we bring artists together and we talk about the career, all the challenge of being an artist, and how they can inspire people. It could be a teenager, children, could be adult, doesn't matter. So the Art Stars is there for that, to understand how an artist became an artist and what it takes.
Sorry, my granddaughter's just in.
Yeah, well, that's totally fine. We're
can
still
switch what you
close
have
to having my kids coming through the door behind the tennis table behind me.
Yeah, this world of working from home is different, hey? You can sit, sweetheart. You just gotta be quiet. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So, how are you doing?
Really well, considering everything. Yeah, no, I've actually been using, can you go shut the door, please, sweetheart? Using this time at home to reconnect with my creative side, and being asked to be a part of this project has really helped with that as well. When I first heard about it, I got really excited and really glad you guys are doing this.
Thank you. Well, thank you. It's also important for us, especially that. So you've been in Fort St. John before, right?
Yes, I lived in Fort St. John from 2009 and I left in late 2013 and came back home. The only reason I moved was because I was having my first grandchild, so I really wanted to be here to be there for my grandkids.
Yeah.
So I miss Fort St. John a lot, though.
So you spent a couple of years here. So my first question, I guess, is who is Aimee Chalifoux?
Well, that's kind of morphed over the years, but right now, being 49 years old, I think I've come full circle. I see myself as a mother, a grandmother, a poet, a story writer, and I like to see myself as someone that like to think that I like to spend my life giving back, and that's pretty much what it's all about for me. So to be able to give back and involve art at the same time, for me, that's what life is about.
So
I'm
we're
very blessed
talking,
my family's involved too.
yeah. So we're talking giving back through the art. Yeah. So poetry, I want to challenge a little bit because I hear it's like classical music and writing and poetry, classical music and rock, for example. I see a lot
Mhm.
of people saying that, well, poetry, it's whole thing and we don't really care. It's better to write a novel or whatever. So, why poetry and how poetry?
Well, for me, ever since I was little, I had a love for words. You know, my mom said that I was in my backyard with a chalkboard and I was holding language classes and writing classes. And when children are first learning how to write, how they just do the little squiggles?
Mhm.
That's what I was writing on my chalkboard. But I understood what those squiggles meant. And I was teaching other kids in my neighborhood what that meant. So I was, trying to get people to fall in love with words even when I was only 4 years old. So that's how it kind of started for me. And then it's morphed over the years for me. So, writing songs as a little girl or as a teenager, for me, it was always a way to, I guess, express myself. And I had a lot of friends growing up that maybe didn't have a way of expressing themselves. So I learned at a young age how to help. You know, I didn't turn down the chance to help anyone else learn how to express themselves in the same way whenever I had the chance, because I feel blessed to be able to do that. Now,
So,
you can't give
yeah,
me a math equation, though. I can't do that, but
but you
I love to
can
do it.
write about your
Mhm.
feelings, about what you're thinking, and put that on paper, right?
Yep. Yep. Sometimes for laughter, sometimes for, um, my granddaughter and I write often together for the sole purpose of making memories. And we have, you know, conversations all the time about how important creating memories are.
Yes, you're right.
Right, right?
And so you're sharing that with your family now? Did you
Yes.
share that with other people than your family?
Yeah, well, in my family and in my community as well, I have done some work doing poetry writing with the youth employment program that we have called here Blade Runners for Nanaimo Youth Services, and that was we wrote it into the program as part of it was cultural identity and loss. And I would go into each of the Blade Runners class, whether it was a construction class or security guard training. They had a culinary arts one, And for a little while, they even had what is it called again? Computer programming, where they learn how to build the computer and then they actually write the programming software into them. And every class I ever had, we wrote a poem together. So it was challenging, walking into a room full of teenagers that are more interested in construction than writing a poem. And sometimes they weren't scared to tell me that. You know, they said we're not poets. We're not really interested. But sometimes they usually ended up writing the best poems. So it was fun. It was a challenge though.
Yeah, I understand, but I also understand that the kid will say, "Oh, I'm not a poet. I'm not interested," and then come up with something. Because I guess what is poetry then?
I believe it's in. I believe we all have a poet inside of us. We all have that creative side. It's just, you know, we've had different barriers in our life, different blockages per se, and sometimes you just need help tapping into that. I've helped people write poems that you would never suspect that they would ever think of writing a poem. So we just have to help them tap into that.
So you send me a couple videos to do that discussion right now. And actually, I told you that I was going to throw them to the interview, but I'd like to keep them. I'd like to keep them and put them in another playlist that we have on YouTube, which is Let's Art. Because I was watching a couple videos, and one of them you had a little game with in a minute, I think, writing words beginning with a
Poetry.
letter.
Mhm.
And the Let's Art program is a free program that is teaching kids arts in general. Mostly drawing, mostly using Play-Dohs. But right now, I think they would be more than happy to have something else with them. And I think that that little
I,
game is really fun. So I'm going to put them on the Let's Talk program and not show them tonight. But I
okay.
like if you can, and I'd like you to tell us what is the process of writing. Hello, you.
Can you wave and say hi? What is my process?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, on different days it's different. Sometimes I find that you know, I have many different processes. I've gone through phases where I don't write anything for a long time. So sometimes I have to come up with creative ways to get that flowing again. And that's where, you know, like the poetry minute, like just putting my pen to paper and I'll time myself for 1 minute, you know, and I challenge myself to not lift that pen. Um, like in the video that I sent you, I think I chose the letter S, or yeah, I did the
Hmm.
letter S or letter W. I
S.
did one with S and
S.
one with W. And then I consider it wordplay, you know, so I'll start off with silver, slivery, sliver, and just eventually it will morph into a poem. There's a few other different exercises I know that kind of grow from that. You start with the poetry minute, and then you pull something out of that, and then you put it onto another piece of paper, and in the end, you'll have a poem. That's just one of my many processes.
And is there things, so I know it's linked to feelings, and we said feelings and expressing and giving back.
Yes.
Do you have a theme, a particular theme, something that you really want to express? Is it more like the feeling of the moment?
For me, it's more the feeling of the moment. I've written everything from spoken word poetry.
Mhm.
That tends to be a little bit deeper, a little bit, you know, I tap into more kind of darker, sadder emotions. You know, those cover topics like loss. Um, and then I've also done Like I like doing rhyme, especially like with my grandkids. When I take my grandkids to when we're driving to school or something like that, we play a lot of word games. Yeah.
And how did that begin? So you told me about Fort St. John as something that really pushed you
Yeah.
towards the
So
art.
when when I lived in Fort St. John, I was the manager of Rising Spirit Aboriginal Youth Center, which I don't think is there anymore. But we did a lot of poetry stuff. We had a poetry night there, and so I got really involved with the youth in the youth center at first, and I would share my poetry with them. And they always loved my poetry, and they always encouraged me. They said, "Aimee, that's really good. You need to start writing more of that." And they really, really inspired me a lot. So I wrote a lot of poetry, some of my best stuff while I was there. And one of the youth that we ended up hiring at the youth center, she ran our cooking program. Um, she's now a published, pretty well known in the North Peace area, Helen Knott.
Mhm.
She just published her first memoir, and she signed me up for an event. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was for International Women's Day, and it was being held. It was held at the Whole Wheat and Honey Cafe
Okay.
on the corner of 100th and the 100th, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was my first time performing any of my spoken word pieces in public. And I was so nervous and terrified because I'd shared it with small groups of people before, like that I knew very well and very personally. The Whole Wheat and Honey was absolutely packed that day, and I didn't know very many of the people there. I was still, I think I'd only been in Fort St. John, I think less than a year. So it was a pretty daunting experience for me. And both Helen and I, she ended up reading that day as well, and it was her first time. And we kind of encouraged each other. Well, we kind of teased each other and bullied each other in a friendly way to get up there and share our poetry. And I think we both fell in love with performing poetry that day. I know I did. And it just got easier for me.
Time after time, it got easier for you.
Mhm.
Time after time, it got easier for you to speak in public or to write poetry.
Yeah. Well, both. I've never had a problem writing the poetry. It was just it was very difficult to. I was always a very shy person, very introverted. And I think through sharing my poetry and working with youth, being a youth worker, it doesn't work being shy when you're with teenagers, right? Um, so I grew a lot through those experiences, and now I have no problem. I can walk into a gymnasium full of teenagers and feel pretty good that I'm gonna do okay. I'm gonna be nervous maybe, but yeah, my confidence has definitely grown. And the more I do it, the better it gets.
Yeah. So you have a Facebook page. It's called Freedom Poetry. Oh,
Poetic freedom.
Poetic Freedom.
Yeah.
And that's where we can see a lot of your work. Is there one in particular you're really proud of?
Yes, I wrote one for my daughters. It's the only the video poem that I have on the page
Yeah.
so far, and that's my absolute favorite one. And that one speaks a lot about having courage. That's why it's my favorite. I don't know it off by heart though.
No, that's fine. We're going to edit that replay and put it there. And for those who are with us right now, you can go to Poetic Freedom.
Yeah, poetic freedom.
So I'd like to go back to teenagers.
Sure.
How hard is it to make them do poetry? And what kind of surprise we can get from that?
I think from my personal experience in youth work, I found that, most teenagers, they struggle with confidence and, um, especially when it comes to stuff like poetry and, being able to write it, being able to share it. So when I do it as a group project, it was even, I found more of a challenge in the beginning. But I found that if I got up there and I showed confidence, even if I was nervous, and I would always joke around and they knew I was nervous and I get really silly when I'm nervous. So it would kind of be an icebreaker. And I remember, I'll tell you about one experience, if that's okay, that I had with a construction class.
Yes.
Within the first 20 minutes of that class, it was literally like the room was silent, it was awkward. I was starting to like feel a little bit sweaty, my palms were sweaty, I was nervous. I thought, oh my god, these kids can't stand me, I'm bombing this. So I ended up letting them go for an early break because they had an hour and a half class and then they took a break. I was like, you know what, maybe we all just need another coffee. So we took a quick 15-minute break. I went outside and I thought about it. Um, kind of, talked with one of my coworkers. And then I just went back in there, I went back into the classroom, and I kind of like cleared myself. And I looked at them all and I said, we're writing a poem today. And they always looked at me and they said, but we don't like poetry. And I said, that's okay. Just humor me. And they ended up writing the absolute best poem. They wrote one of my favorite poems. It was so good that my boss actually said that he asked all the students permission if he could take the poem. Because what they do is I had a big whiteboard behind me in the class.
Mhm.
And then I would find one student that sort of, did have confidence. And I would get them up on there with the markers and they would write a poem together. And I would get them taking turns coming up. So it would, if they see one person having the confidence to come up and do it,
Yeah.
I didn't make them come up. I said it was totally optional. You could write, you could just have someone else write it down for you. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And that,
So it is very challenging working with teenagers, but I find that if they see that you're you're confident, and even if you're nervous, still confidence is still being able to stand up there though, and that helped.
do you remember what the theme of the poem?
That one that day was, oh, I actually have a copy of it somewhere. Trying to remember what the theme word was that we chose. I think what we did was we got everybody in the class to try and pull up a memory of their grandparents or their parents or anything that to identify what kind of cultural background they had, whether it was German, Polish, Cree, French,
Mhm.
Russian. There was a lot of diversity in the class that day, but I had to help them dig deep to remember that. And then if they remembered one word in their language, usually a greeting like a hello or a goodbye or welcome, thank you, something like that. Then we would use that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would use Google if they weren't too sure. They knew, okay, well, I know that my grandpa was German, but I didn't, or Japanese, but I don't know any words in his language. Then we would just Google it. And so they would learn, right? Usually there was someone else in the class that, even though they weren't Japanese, they knew how to say hello in Japanese. So it just kind of grew from there. And then they ended up writing a second poem because they were excited about the first one. They ended up writing a second poem, and that one was it was something about we are youth. It started off with we are youth, and then it grew into what their hopes and dreams were, and what legacy they wanted to leave. It was pretty powerful.
That's very interesting. You know that we had the BC game in February, January,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, February, and the catchphrase was "We are North." So really the same idea, demonstrating
Oh,
that we are somewhere, we are something, and that that
I
give
didn't know
you
that.
who we are.
That's really neat. Yeah, that ended up being one of my favorite classes that day. I miss
So,
doing that.
so what good the poetry bring to your world?
Sorry?
What good the poetry bring to your world?
Well, I'm always my hometown. Um, but even when I was working up north with the youth, up north in the Peace area, I found that poetry helped me connect with people. As you know, Fort St. John was could be kind of a rough town. The kids face a lot of barriers there. Winter, they're quite isolated. It's cold. There's all sorts of issues going on up there.
Hmm.
I found that it was a really strong way for me to connect with the youth. And same in my work here too. So yeah, but like I said, it's not easy. It took some work, and I had to battle my own sort of fears, and because we're all human, right? And
Yeah.
standing in front of 30 people who might not like you or think you're weird, or you're just some old lady nerd, right? It was a little intimidating for me in the beginning, but so worth it. So worth it.
And with the family, how is it going?
Pardon?
And with the family, how is it going? The poetry with the family.
Amazing. I This one here is the she's the future writer in the family. Her and I write songs together, we write poems together, we create all kinds of videos together. It sort of started off as a silly thing on Snapchat. Remember our Snapchat videos we used to make with the kitties? Remember the camera where it puts a kitty on, it makes you look like a kitty? And then in the car, of course, whenever we go for drives, our favorite thing to do is what write songs, right? And I connected with, it was really silly, like when they were first born, when they were babies. She has a brother that's a year and a half younger than her. um, I would write them each silly songs, and one was, what's your favorite song that Cookham wrote for you? Do you remember the turkey song? It was just Shyla is a turkey, and we would sing that. And then my van that I had at the time, my minivan, kind of became known as the turkey van. So it was like everybody in the turkey van, and it just sort of stuck. Like even my daughters and my son, we all call it the turkey van now, right? So it started off with silly little limericks like that, and then yeah, she's getting pretty good at it. Her mom just did a video with her yesterday in the backyard, lip syncing. What's the name of that song you were singing? What's it called? From the movie Frozen, Let It
Okay.
Be. And she was. Let it go. Or Let It Go, sorry. Cookham's a little bit out of the loop. Yeah. So yeah, and my son, I have a 31-year-old son he's a natural. He picked up a guitar when he was, I believe he was 14 years old. Taught himself how to play.
Okay.
He borrowed it from a family member, from his step grandpa, and I told him that if he showed me that he was dedicated to it, I would make sure that he had his own guitar. And he didn't really leave his room for the rest of the summer. And he's an unbelievable songwriter now. And so I ended up getting him his first guitar.
Nice. So I have a bunch of questions for you now. It's
Sure.
small answers. It's always the same question. It's small answers and really what goes through your mind at that moment. What is your favorite qualities in a man and in a woman?
What are my favorite qualities? My favorite qualities. I'm I'm drawn to I'm drawn to bravery, and I don't mean in your traditional movie Hollywood type bravery where, somebody is portrayed as always strong. I mean, the kind of bravery where even when you're scared, you still give it a try. To me, that's what bravery is. That's got to be my favorite quality.
What you appreciate the most in your friends?
I'm oh my gosh, I have a lot of amazing people in my life. Um, I think what I appreciate the most about my friends is understanding that they understand and accept me for who I am. Acceptance would be, if I had to choose one word, it would be that they're accepting.
Your favorite occupation?
My favorite occupation, like that I've had, or
Yeah,
just in general,
in general.
being an outreach worker.
Okay, follow-up question. Why?
Because I was one of those youth that fell through the cracks, kind of slipped through the system. So I guess an urgency to be able to be there when that window of opportunity to connect with a troubled youth is open.
A little confidence. I've been an outreach a youth worker too, and it was at the end. It was kind of sad and happy because you have so many youth that go through your hands, and only few of them will do something better, and the other one you don't know, and there is always some who how hard your work is always going to end up bad. How do you deal with that kind of trouble, or do you have the same?
Well, it was actually up north was my first experience with you know the bad part, the sad part of being a youth outreach worker, um, and having to say goodbye to youth that I had lost.
Mm.
Um, I'm human, so I went through the grieving process. At one point, I didn't want to be a youth worker anymore, and I didn't actually stop, but um, I had. I'm not a religious person, but I do consider myself to be spiritual, and this one youth in particular, um, and there could be many reasons for this to have happened, but him and I had this ongoing joke that when I moved up north, the first one of the first things I wanted to see was a moose. I had
Mhm.
never seen a moose. And for some reason, every time I was in a vehicle or we were, out and about somewhere and somebody would say, "Oh, hey, Aimee, there's a moose, look." And I would look and the moose would be gone. So it became, everybody teased me about it. It became kind of like an inside joke with my friends and my family. In fact, my partner one time came home at lunchtime and he pulled into the driveway real quick. He's like, "Quick, grab your slippers, hop into the car. We got to go." I was like, "What? Why?" And he's like, "Because there's a moose." So we hopped into the car and we raced down 88th Street, and just in time to see that, all I saw was like the tip end of the moose's butt going around the corner, and I didn't get to see him. So after this youth had passed, and we went out to his service, it was it was a really sad day. And on our way back into Fort St. John, because it took place outside of town, um, someone in the van said, "Hey, Aimee, take a look." And I looked over, and it was out in Bear Flats area there, and they were everywhere. I
Wow.
had not even seen, like, I didn't just see one moose; they were like everywhere. And I just got this warm, glowy, like, and I just started to giggle, and I looked at the sky, and I was like, "Thank you." To me at the time, it felt like, because it was a joke that him and I had, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of, yeah, that was my inspiration to keep going because I know how strong of a connection that I made with him, and I know how much of an impact he made on my life. So do they all, become successful? I believe success looks different for everybody. I still hear from most of those youth today. I hear from them when they have babies, when they get proposed to, when they get their class 1 driver's license, and then yeah, when sad stuff happens to them too. So I think the most important thing I learned through all of that was how important self-care is, because if I'm not healthy and strong and not able to process my emotions and my grief, then how are they going to learn? Because they learn from us. They learn from the people who are older than them, the people who are leading them, right? So it wasn't easy, but yeah, self-care is the most important thing. So and I wrote about it a lot. That helped. That, that's how I process things.
Your idea of happiness.
My idea of happiness. Can it be a sentence or a word?
It's up to you.
Mm, my idea of happiness is sitting back and watching all my kids together. All my kids are adults now. My middle daughter is the only one that has kids. My idea of happiness is just watching them all together and get along and support each other.
If not yourself, who would you be?
Who would I be if not myself? Oh, wow. I, I don't know that that would be like a particular person, like it's a single individual, but I think that I would be, I don't know, that's a really tough one. You got me there. Who do you think Cookham would want to be? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not too sure. I don't know that I could narrow that down. Kanan, your brother? I don't know.
Why not? Why not?
Sorry,
Your
that's a tough
brother
one.
is learning poetry with his grandma, so could be a good choice.
Yep.
What do you hate the most?
What do I hate most? Meanness. People that are mean.
The last one. What is your present state of mind?
I'm peaceful and happy. Even with everything that's going on around me, I'm very grateful that um, I'm at least under the same roof as my grandkids and 2 of my daughters. I don't know that I could get through this without them right now. Um, you know, I've had my moments where it's been hard to not see the rest of my family. So yeah, I'm grateful.
Well, Aimee, thank you. Those question hands our discussion. Do you have anything else you would like to add? A little message for Fort St. John or something else?
I, I think to Fort St. John.
Yeah.
My message to Fort St. John would be that I'm really grateful for all the friendships that I made while I was there. Um, I'm still in touch with most of my friends from Fort St. John, and I learned so much about confidence and perseverance while I was there, and I will never be able to express how grateful I am for that. And yeah, just keep on writing. That's about it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close now. You stay with me. I'm just going to put
Okay.
something else to end the stream. Thank you to those viewers, and you'll be able to see that replay on YouTube. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.